Another semiconductor which is commonly used is germanium, but germanium is much costlier and therefore it is not very popular, whereas silicon is very abundantly available. The basic source of silicon is sand. Sand is everywhere. You see, desert is full of sand. Every river, every valley, seashores, everywhere you can get sand. So silicon is abundant in the earth crust, and therefore one of the most abundant element in the earth crust is silicon. Okay, so because of that and also some other advantages which we will see later, silicon based devices is very common in semiconductor industry. Okay, but other materials like in the fourth group is germanium, another popular material. Germanium also has diamond structure. When it is in the pure crystalline form, germanium also has diamond structure. Then we talked about other than the elemental semiconductor, we had what is called as the the binary or compound semiconductor. Among compound semiconductor, the most popular compound semiconductor is compound semiconductor. We have gallium arsenide. Okay, gallium arsenide is one of the most popular, and especially for all the LEDs, most of the LEDs that we make for IR, say for example the remote control. Every house has a remote controller for TV remotes and all, so which make use of IR detector and IR LED, so which are basically made of gallium arsenide. Now what is the structure of gallium arsenide? Okay, gallium arsenide atomic structure. Now the structure is very similar to what we have seen with respect to silicon. Now only difference is that if you think about silicon structure or the diamond structure as two interpenetrating FCC lattices, so that is exactly the structure of gallium arsenide. Only difference is that one of the FCC will be occupied by gallium atoms, and the second FCC will be which is shifted or displaced by a vector a by 4 a by 4 a by 4 will be occupied by the arsenic atoms. Okay, so and this structure is called Woodside structure. Okay, so which is also two interpenetrating FCC lattices. Also two interpenetrating FCC lattices displaced by a by 4, a by 4, a by 4, where a is basically the lattice constant, okay, which is the dimension of the unit cell which we consider. Okay. One of this FCC lattice, one of them is occupied by gallium atoms, and the other is occupied by arsenic atoms. Okay. So if you draw it, it will be same way you have to draw it. So this is one cube where you have all the gallium atoms forming an FCC. Okay, then it is there on the faces also. So this is gallium atom, and then added to that you have a second FCC, which is a shifted version by A by 4, A by 4. So A by 4 is somewhere here. So here you have all the arsenic atom. Okay, so these are arsenic atoms. And then arsenic atoms will be there in the corner, in the face of the second FCC. Okay, so they are two FCC lattice. So the green is your gallium. So it's gallium like this, and then you have arsenic atoms, which is shown by this color. So they are like this. So if you take any gallium atom, it will have 4 nearest neighbors, which are arsenic atoms. Okay. So if you take any gallium atom, there will be 4 nearest neighbors, which are arsenic atoms. Okay, so like this. Okay, so there is a gallium atom at the center, which is entering into covalent bond with the 4 arsenic atoms. Okay, let me just draw like this. Okay. Similarly, if I take any arsenic atom, it will have 4 nearest neighbors, which are gallium atoms. So it will make bond with all the nearest neighbors like this. So both are forming, it's a tetrahedral structure again, everything is same, only thing is that the second lattice is a different species of atoms. Or you can think of it as a one FCC lattice, with each lattice point have 2 atoms associated, one gallium atom, one arsenic atom together. And they are displaced by A by 4, A by 4 everywhere. So that way also one can think about. So like this. Every place we have. Like that. Okay. So that's about arsenic. So these are the most popular germanium, silicon, gallium arsenide, and you can, this similar way you can discuss other materials also. Most of them have fall under cubic lattice system, and in cubic lattice system we have FCC lattice system, and in FCC we have each lattice point having 2 atoms, so which are called basis atoms. Okay, so this way you can think about these popular materials. Now, so the structure of an atom is, or structure of a particular material, solid crystal, is determined by the species of atom, trying to satisfy the outer shell with the minimum number of electrons. Okay, so that it will fill the shell with all the required number of electrons. So that is how it will decide. For example, another which is not a semiconductor, but if you are interested to know like how things happen in the case of a sodium in solid form, how does what is its structure? Sodium has basically one outer shell has only one atom, right? So in order to satisfy its outer shell, it has to enter into bond with the 7 other it has to try bonding with 8 other sodium atoms, and if you have 8 other sodium atom coming around one sodium atom, then it can satisfy the outer shell with 8 electrons. Now, how does sodium do that? So sodium do that by forming what is called as the body-centered cube. Okay, so body-centered cube. This is not really part of just for completeness I am just mentioning it, but it is not necessary for our subject. Okay, so sodium form BCC lattice. So how the structure is linked to these species, that is why I am discussing it. So sodium form BCC lattice because if you take a body-centered cube, which we discussed earlier, that is one of the variations of the cubic lattice system, just like FCC, which is more important for semiconductors. But if you are curious to know where is body center, how body center become important, so there is a corner atom at each of the corner of the cube, and then imagine at the center you have another atom. Okay, so how many nearest neighbors is there? For the body centered atom, you have all this atom in the corner are nearest neighbors. So how many of them are there? You have 4 above and 4 below. So there are 8 atoms. So if you are interested to place 8 atoms as nearest neighbors, all are equidistant. Okay, so the center of the cube and the corner of the cube, all the corners are at equidistance. Okay, so this way if you want to place it, so you will get a resulting structure which is BCC lattice. Okay, so everywhere you have Na. All of these are Na, sodium. So 4 above and 4 below. Whereas in silicon you have only 4 nearest neighbors. It is a tetrahedron. Okay, so this is the way the structure actually comes out of the requirement of each atom when they form solid, is that they should try to acquire the enough number of electrons. So if it is the same species of atom that is coming together, then accordingly those atoms will be sitting in certain way such that they will all be equidistant from the a particular atom. And similarly you can show that if you take this solid atom, then you can see that there will be 8 nearest neighbors. Okay, so one is this, and then one here, one here. So they will form the next bottom layer, and similarly one at the top also. So this way they will also have 8 atoms. So similarly any atom that you take in a BCC, there will be 8 nearest neighbors. This is also called as coordination number. Okay, so that gives rise to BCC lattice for sodium. So let me not make it messy. So let me do this. Okay. So now another example, sodium chloride, NaCl. That has a very unique structure. If you look at the structure of a sodium chloride, what you will see is that sodium has one electron only at the outermost shells. Chlorine require one electron to fill the state. So it is forming basically what is called as ionic bond. Okay, so sodium will lose that electron it will give off that electron to chlorine, and chlorine become negative ion, and sodium become positive ions. And then there will be, once this happens, losing and gaining happens, then there will be electrostatic pull between the two, and when you reach equilibrium distance, then the electrostatic attraction will be minimum. So that will be an equilibrium space. So if you look at the structure of NaCl, so there is sodium atom, sodium atom, sodium atom, sodium atom. So you think about a big cube made of sodium atom. Okay, so this is the cube. Again, so this is also having a cubic structure. So this is one cube, and the second cube, okay, so this will be an FCC cube. Okay, so FCC means, again, you have sodium atom on the face also. So left, right, then top, bottom, front, back. So these are all sodium atom. Now where do you put the silicon atom? So again, it is a displacement by A by 2, A by 2, A by 2. Okay, so that is how we have to put. So there will be like this. So this is going to be another FCC. So here, so this will be chlorine atom, and this will be sodium atom. So in other words, you can think about the first FCC lattice, you are thinking about as just displaced by A by 2. Displaced by A by 2. Okay, similarly this will be displaced by A by 2. So everywhere I have drawn, so there is a displacement by A by 2, which will give so at the center also there is so similar, this way it continues. So this is the structure of NaCl. So the point is that so depending upon the species, the structure will be decided. Okay, so I have shown few examples. So these two examples are not really not very much needed for our course, but just for sodium crystal, it has BCC lattice. This is NaCl crystal. But for our purpose, what is important is the above Woodside structure and the diamond structure. Okay, so these are the two most important structures. Now, the rest of the time, what I am going to discuss is about how to get crystalline material from the raw material, crystalline silicon. How can we make from the raw material, which is sand, I have told already. So we need to take the sand and convert it into a pure silicon crystal. So the entire wafer that you see, something like a very 2D shape, circular 2D shape. So there are this is like when you buy wafer, you don't buy like one wafer, but like a cassette of wafer, maybe having 25 numbers. Okay, and so if you look at this wafer, this is a silicon wafer, and you can see the direction is given as this angular bracket 100. So what is meant by that? This is basically the perpendicular. So direction of a plane can be specified by a unit vector perpendicular to it. Okay, so here this direction is called 100. So that means this plane is 100 plane, and the unit vector perpendicular to that. So if you talk about this plane, it will be written as 100. I told you 100 is most commonly used. So you can specify the plane of the wafer by specifying the direction perpendicular to it also. So direction is specified by angular bracket, and the plane is specified by Miller indices in parenthesis. And its resistivity is given. Resistivity, resistance is basically rho into L by A. Okay, so this is the resistivity. So that is given ohm centimeter. Okay, and then it is doped with boron. So that is mentioned here, p-type. Okay, so doping I will discuss a little later. So it is doped with p-type impurity, and therefore it is. And its diameter is given as 10 centimeter. Okay, so 10 centimeter is the diameter. Okay, this diameter. Okay, so these are the specification of the wafer. So how to get this? And it is entirely a single crystal. 10 centimeter from one end to another end. It is a single crystal regular arrangement, as we have shown earlier. How to make it? So you take the sand. Okay, and the first step is to convert this into what is called as metallurgical grade silicon. So it is basically a reaction. Okay, you heat it to 2000 degrees. Sand you take and heat it to 2000. It will melt. 2000 degrees Celsius, the sand will melt. So SiO2 is sand basically, and that will be reacted with the carbon. Carbon, like it is available in charcoal, coal, etc. Okay. So when you make this reaction, what will happen? You will get what is silicon. Okay, silicon will come in liquid form. Okay, so at 2000 degrees Celsius, sand is not liquid. Okay, sand is not melted. Let me correct. So it is still in solid form, and carbon is also in solid form. But when they react, the product that you get, silicon, will be in liquid state. So because the reactants is in solid, and the products, one is silicon and other is carbon monoxide, which is basically gas. So you can separate out from the solid the liquid and gas, and that liquid you collect and cool it down, and you will get some silicon crystal. And the purity is not very high. It is only 98% purity, but for our purpose it is unacceptable. Okay, but this is called metallurgical grade silicon. Now metallurgical grade silicon is not only used for electronics purpose, but also for other industry, like aluminium industry also require some amount of silicon. So this product is used in various industries. But in order for electronic purposes, we need to purify it to much higher level of purity. That means the impurity atom should be something like 1 in 1 billion. Okay, so for every 1 billion silicon atom, that is 10 raised to 9 silicon atom, there we can allow 1 impurity atom. So to that level it has to be purified. So what is the next procedure? So the next procedure is you take your metallurgical grade silicon, MGS, and then you powder it, and then introduce it into an atmosphere of hydrogen chloride gas. Okay, hydrogen chloride gas, it will react at 300 degrees Celsius, and it will form a product. Or there are many products that will be formed, SiH4, which is called silane, and then SiH3Cl, that is monochlorosilane, and then dichlorosilane, okay, trichlorosilane, and then silicon tetrachloride. Okay, so these are the products that we will get. They are all in gaseous form, but you can separate one of those products, that is trichlorosilane, SiHCl3, using what is called as distillation. Probably you have studied that in chemistry. So distillation is like the method by which different different what do you call, boiling point is there for different species, and you can convert it into liquid by cooling to certain temperature. Since different gases has different point at which it condenses, so it will be collected at those point of temperature to separate out one species from a multiple. The same way you do petroleum, you convert crude petroleum into diesel and kerosene or petrol, etc. Okay, so you separate out trichlorosilane, and then you take the trichlorosilane and react it with the hydrogen gas, okay, in a separate chamber which is heated by some rods. You can see here RF heating is taking place, and then what will happen is that it will result in two products. One is silicon, which is in solid form, and hydrochloride, which is gaseous. So hydrochloride will be removed, and the solid will be actually formed in the form of a rod. So you can see here. So apart from the heating rod, which is at the middle, you have a orange colored rod, which is basically initially it will be very thin, but as this reaction goes on, the solid silicon material will get deposited on the top of this rod, and it is a silicon rod, but this silicon rod will grow with time, and this reaction goes for for days, because it's slowly getting accumulated and accumulated. The diameter of the rod gets increased and increased and increased until you get a thick rod. So that is the way in which and this is a very pure silicon, because all the impurities are removed, okay, through this two-step process. So metallurgical is converted into electronic grade silicon, and the silicon that we get will not be a single crystalline, it will be polysilicon, okay, polycrystalline. So there will be certain region of periodicity, but then it is only to some limit of length, and then you have different domains, different grains that we studied earlier. Okay, so what did we see so far? We took the sand, put it into this crucible, heated it to 2000 degrees Celsius. Sand will still be solid, but the product that will be formed after reacting with carbon will be in liquid form, and the liquid silicon will be collected, and it is solidified to get what is called as metallurgical grade silicon. To produce 1 kg of metallurgical grade silicon, we need to spend 13 kilowatt hour energy. Okay, and the byproducts are basically carbon monoxide, which is a gas that can be easily separated. And then we take this powder, the metallurgical silicon is powdered, reacted with hydrochloride, and then we will get many products, out of which one of them is distilled out using distillation chamber, and then that will go to reduction reaction with the hydrogen gas. Okay, and the product you get is solid silicon, which will get deposited on the already existing seed rod. Okay, seed rod is like initially introduced rod where the silicon atom will continue to get accumulated. So that way we got electronic grade silicon. Now the next step is basically the electronic grade silicon is not very pure. So this silicon we need to pure, it is very pure, but it is not a single crystalline. Okay, electronic grade silicon is very pure, but it is not single crystalline. We need single crystalline. Okay, it is a polysilicon material. Okay, this rod, after it grows, it is very pure, because impurity is only 1 in 1 billion of silicon atom. 1 atom of impurity comes in 1 billion of silicon atom. So it is very pure, really pure. Whereas metallurgical grade silicon was only 98%. That means out of 100 atom, 2 atoms are impurity atoms out of 100 atoms. Here it is like out of 10 raised to 9 atoms, only 1 atom is impurity atom. So it is definitely very pure. But the problem is that it is not a single crystal. But for electronic application, we need single crystal. So how to get single crystal from electronic grade silicon? So the process is called Czochralski crystal growth. And what we do is that we again take this silicon, that is the electronic grade silicon, we take it in a crucible, silica crucible. This crucible is usually made up of silica, and then you heat it up. Silica has very high melting point, so the crucible will not get melted, but the silicon will be melted inside, just like in step 1. And then what will happen is that we introduce a very pure crystalline silicon from the top. This is called seed crystal, and that will have an orientation, say 100. If you want to have 100 wafers to be made, so you should introduce a small element, small block of 100 crystal. Okay, so when you introduce from the top, the cross section will be having 100 plane. So when you put it, so it will join with the melt, and then what you do is gradually pull it. So when you pull it out of the melt, it gets cooled and gets solidified, and that way the crystal will grow. So the rate of pulling is like 1 millimeter you pull per an hour. Okay, so it's a very slow way you are pulling it up. So what is happening is that each of the atom of silicon in the melt will take a crystalline position. Gradually it will take crystalline position such that the entire thing will become a single crystal. Okay, so we get this type of large, so this diameter will be like the diameter of the wafer. So it's like a cylindrical shape, maybe it's 30 centimeter, and the height after the process that you will get is like a rod which has a length of 1 meter or something. Okay, 1 meter, 1.5 meter, etc. Okay, so the temperature at which this is taking place is 1417 degrees Celsius. It's very much controlled, and for uniform distribution of this temperature in the melt, what is done is this entire mechanism is rotated. The crucible with respect to the seed material or the pulled up material, which is called ingot. Okay, silicon ingot. So that is this blue thing or a cyan colored thing. Okay, so silicon ingot is pulled out. Okay, so it grows depending upon the speed of rotation and the speed of pulling. It will decide how much is the diameter of the cylinder, etc. Okay, so it's a very slow process. As I said, pulling is done at a very slow rate. 1 millimeter only you will pull in an hour. Okay, so that will give you a single crystalline. So from the melt it is going into solid state. So during the process it will take crystalline structure. Now one problem with this method is that from the crucible there are some impurity atom present inside the crucible. Though the silicon that we are taking electronic grade is very pure, but from the crucible some carbon atom or some oxygen atom may come and enter into this and reduce its purity. So though we get a single crystalline material, but the purity will be reduced. So in order to overcome that, sometimes this is followed with what is called as float zone technique. And what is float zone technique? You take the silicon ingot, which is like a rod like this. You can do this directly with polysilicon also. So the purpose is to purify the rod and make it into single crystalline. So you have a coil which will heat up the ingot, and it will melt in the nearby region, and then you move this coil, heating coil, gradually upward. So what will happen? The top region will get melted and the bottom region will get solidified. Then one of the interesting thing is that if there are impurities in a material, solid material, okay, and that impurity will go to the liquid portion, and the percentage of impurity in the liquid is actually 10 times greater than the percentage of impurity in the solid portion. So this is called segregation constant. Okay, so let me write it as segregation. What is segregation constant? It is basically the ratio of impurity content in solid divided by impurity content in liquid. So here solid and liquid silicon. Okay, so liquid silicon will have higher, so this is of the order of 10 roughly. Okay, sorry, so this will be 0.1. sorry, this usually liquid will have, so if I define it as the ratio of impurity content in solid, because we are basically removing the impurity from the solid, and if it has to go to liquid, then the liquid should have a lot of impurity content, the ratio. So this is called segregation constant. So segregation constant is something like 0.1. So therefore when you melt some portion, the impurity from the solid will tend to go to the liquid, and then when you solidify it back, the solid will become more pure. So you move this coil from one end of the ingot to the other end of the ingot, or you take the polysilicon and move it, so that will become more and more pure. So the silicon material will be like 99.999999%. Okay, so it's very pure. So some 99.79, that much is the percentage of purity, and it is all in a single crystal. Okay, so if you want to see that crystal, how does it look like? So it will look like something like this. So you can see here. So this is the silicon ingot which I talked about. Okay, so this is, now this is to be cut with some wires, which is coated with the diamond. Diamond is a very strong material which is used for cutting many of the metals and even iron or whatever. You can easily cut it with the diamond. Diamond is very strong. So you can use these wires coated with diamond particles, diamond coated wire. Okay, and they will be made to go like this. It will be going around, and it will make wedges, and then finally it will cut it into slices. Okay, so that is what we will get as wafers. Okay, each of this slice is called wafers, and then wafer will be polished. It will be very rough after cutting, so we need to do polishing, and polishing is done with a combination of mechanical and chemical process. Okay, so we will introduce some chemicals, and then we will rub with the, so this method is almost like sandpaper. We iron and all, we can polish by using sandpaper, right? So sandpaper has some rough surface on it, and then you catch with it, it will make it smoothened. If there is any rough area like rust or things like that, it will remove. So similar kind of procedure is done. It will be polishing, and since the chemical is also involved, that will make it uniform surface. So the topography of the surface is going to become very uniform. So that is what is called as chemical mechanical polishing. Okay, so far we did only pure silicon crystal formation. Okay, So it had all this process involved. Now if you want to dope it with some impurity, the doping is can be done with along with mixing some amount of so if the crystal that you make, if you want to make it a p-type wafer, okay, or a p-type crystal, then you have to mix those impurity, phosphorus or gallium, inside this silicon melt, and then if you pull it, you will get p-type or n-type semiconductor. But if you want to dope it with dope later, like you want to make a wafer which is pure, that means intrinsic silicon, no other impurity is present, it's a pure crystalline, and then if you want to convert that pure crystalline into doped, that is you want to add impurity purposefully in order to modify its conductivity property. So n-type and p-type has better conductivity than the pure silicon. So if you want to tune the conductivity, then you need to do doping, and doping can be done in two different ways. One is diffusion, other is ion implantation. What is diffusion? Diffusion is a method in which you hold the wafer in an atmosphere of impurity gas, and you raise the temperature, say, to 1000 degrees Celsius. So the impurity gas will penetrate the wafer because of the thermal energy. Some of the silicon atoms will come out also from the wafer, and some of the impurity atoms will go inside. So you keep an atmosphere of impurity atom around the silicon wafer, keep it at a high temperature, say 1000 degrees Celsius, and then it will diffuse, because outside the wafer you have high concentration of impurity atom in gaseous form, and these atoms will try to penetrate inside the wafer and go deep inside. So that will make it n-type or p-type depending upon what kind of gaseous atoms we have surrounding the wafer. Another method is most popular, which is ion implantation. Ion implantation is basically shooting impurity ions inside the wafer. So you keep the wafer like this. So you can see that there is a stand, and in this stand you can see the silicon wafers are kept like this, and then you bring one of the wafer here like this, and then you see then ions are created in this what you call ion chamber, and so ions are created, and then you pick out a particular E by M ratio, that is mass to charge ratio or charge to mass ratio, by using what is called as electromagnet mass separator. Okay, and then you accelerate that ion, that particular ion which is separated, that you want to implant. Implant means something like shooting with a gun. Okay, but here the bullet is like the impurity ions. Ions are required so that we can use electrostatic potential to accelerate it. So you accelerate this ion will go to some 50 kilo electron volt energy, 50 to 100 kilo electron volt energy, and then they will shoot on this wafer, and it will penetrate the wafer and go inside. So depending upon how much deep you want the penetration, you have to raise the energy of the ion. So this is called ion implantation technique. It has much more controllability, like you can control the depth, you can control the level of the concentration of the impurity, etc. can be controlled very well. So it will be a fast process compared to diffusion, which is a slow process. So a picture is shown here. You can see the ion, high energy ions are coming, and then what is happening. If the ions are very low energy, then it will just come and deposit it on the top. That's not what we want. We want it to go inside. So if you keep increasing the energy, at some point of time it will just rip away the silicon atom. It is not going inside. But if it is sufficiently high energy, it will just shoot and go inside the material and occupy these spaces inside. This diagram here is showing basically the depth to which these impurity ions will go, the distribution of the impurity ion. So this is the surface, here is the surface. So you are impinging from here, the ions are coming from the left side and it is going and get distributed underneath the surface over a region. So if you give 200 kilo electron volt, then it will be around 0.5 micrometer deep it will go. But if you want to go only say 100 say nanometer depth, so then 50 kilo electron volt will be sufficient. If you give 100 kilo electron volt, maybe it will go to something like 300 nanometer. So depending upon the depth, the impurity should be distributed where you want to make N-type and P-type. So you have a lot of control here. By controlling the energy, controlling the species of ion, you can decide. So this is boron in silicon. This data is for boron in silicon. Similarly, arsenic in silicon will give you N-type. Boron in silicon will give you P-type. Okay, so now another problem with this ion implantation is that when you implant these high energetic ions into this silicon wafer, what will happen is that its crystallinity, that is like it should be a single crystalline, everything will be collapsed. So in order to bring it back, what you do is basically called annealing. Annealing is basically keeping it at a slightly higher temperature such that these atoms will move and occupy the proper crystalline positions, lattice points. So in order to bring it back into the lattice points, we need to do what is called annealing. Annealing is just keeping it at a higher temperature for some period of time, a definite period of time, say few minutes. So in that few minutes, the atoms which has gone out of the lattice points will come back and it will be crystallinity will be restored. Not only that, the impurity atoms which are put inside, they should also sit in the lattice points. So if the impurity atoms are not sitting in the lattice points, they will not be electronically active. Okay, so it is not enough to put the impurity atoms inside the wafer. We also need to put it in the lattice positions, then only it is going to change the electronic property. But instead of that, if you put it in interstitial spaces, okay, so if you see the crystal, there is some position or a gap between the atoms inside the crystal. So if one impurity, say phosphorus, is going and sitting there, it will not be electronically active. Okay, so in order to make it electronically active, it has to replace a silicon atom. Okay, silicon atom should come out and then the phosphorus atom should go there. Okay, so it has to replace the silicon atom. So silicon atom has to be replaced with a phosphorus atom, or silicon atom should be replaced with a boron atom. So only in such conditions you will have electronically active material. Okay, N-type or P-type you can call only in that. So annealing will make that also possible. Okay, so it will restore the crystallinity. So one thing. Second thing is that it will make the impurity atoms to take the lattice points and thereby making it electronically active. So both of these are achieved through annealing. Okay, so these are basically the steps of doping. So you can have either the wafer itself made as a P-type or N-type wafer, or you can make selectively certain regions of the wafer you can make N-type or P-type by using ion implantation or diffusion process. Okay, so this was basically to give you an idea of how to convert the sand, which is the raw material, into wafer, which is N-type or P-type or even intrinsic material. Now if you have any doubts, any questions, you can ask.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Sir, I have a doubt from yesterday's class, sir.
Okay, tell me.
Sir, about the surface density, sir.
Ah,
Sir, there you said that it is better if it is small, sir. as possible.
Yes,
So what
yes.
is the reason for this? Can you explain it once again, sir?
Right. So if you have the surface density smaller, then what will happen is that the number of atoms per unit area is less. That's what the meaning or the definition of surface density is: the number of atoms on the surface per unit area. Okay, if you take a 1 unit area, how many atoms are there? So if it is smaller, that means only few number of atoms are there. The material is still the same, the crystal is still the same, but we are taking a particular surface. So if it is smaller, the number of atoms on the surface is lesser. Now if the number of atoms on the surface is lesser, then those atoms which are wanting to react with atmospheric elements, say maybe an oxygen is passing by, and it will try to catch hold of that oxygen atom and react with it and form some bond with it, which is not desirable. If the atoms are more atoms will be reactive. So all the surface atoms are not satisfied with enough electrons. It is not like the atoms well inside the bulk material. They are having 4 nearest neighbors, like the tetrahedron shape and etc. But what about the surface atoms? So it is only able to make a bond with whatever is below. Above it, it is not having anything to bond with, right?
Yes, sir.
So they will be reactive. So reactive, more are there means the material is going to be more reactive because more atoms are there per unit area. So we have to take a surface which has minimum possible exposed atoms, which are basically not satisfied and therefore reactive.
Sir,
Yeah.
if surface atoms form bond with the atoms inside the cube, sir.
Yeah,
then
it will form bonds, but see, if you take a tetrahedron shape, it is a 3D shape, right? It's a
yes,
3D shape. So if it is a 3D shape, that means bonding is in a 3D dimension. So if one dimension you don't have atom, say the above dimension, surface means above it you don't have any atom to bond with, right? So that will remain unsatisfied. That's the issue.
Then, will it be reacting with other environmental
Yes.
factors?
So that is
Yes.
why
Surface atoms.
correct. So even if you see the reason why the iron, if you take, it will become iron oxide. What is the reason? Because the iron on the surface, the iron atoms on the surface, it is not getting other iron atoms to make bond with in order to satisfy its shell requirement. So it will catch hold of the oxygen which is plenty available in the atmosphere, and then it will react with. Nitrogen is not interested to make any bond because it is a very inert. Okay.
Yes.
Nitrogen gas will not react, but the next is plenty available is oxygen. So it will react with oxygen because oxygen give himself into the reaction. It is not that inert, so it also has some requirement, etc. So that is how the rust is created. So it is all coming from the surface. If you polish it using a sandpaper, underneath you don't have rust. That's because there everything is satisfactory.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So most of these material elements, you see, when you take it in pure form, it immediately react with atmosphere and form some oxides on the surface. So same thing goes with silicon also. But what we can do is minimize that reactivity. So the availability of the surface atoms has to be minimized. That is why 100 direction or 100 plane is preferred, because it is the plane where minimum surface atoms are present.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now later you
Yes,
see
sir.
that when you make devices, on the top of the surface you will bring in some other material. So wafer will be coated with many other material. So then comes a lot of reactions. So we want a clean interface, not a very messy interface. So that will affect the operation of the device.